Welcome to the Widowed Mom Podcast, episode 234, Widows Unfiltered, an interview with Paula Fleming.
Welcome to the Widowed Mom Podcast, the only podcast that offers a proven process to help you work through your grief, to grow, evolve, and create a future you can truly look forward to. Here's your host, Master Certified Life Coach, grief expert, widow, and mom, Krista St. Germain.
Welcome to another episode of the podcast. I just got back from visiting one of my team members and friends, Jamie. You've probably listened to her episode of the podcast called Surviving the First Year with Jamie Gallion. And I went to Denver, where she lives, last week for a Pink concert. It was amazing. And while I was there, I actually got to spend time with the person you're about to hear from, Paula. We had lunch and a few of my former clients were there. Paula's still in the master's program, but also I got to hang out with Carol and Laura and Jamie, of course. And it was really so fun to spend some time with her in person. And then the next day from Jamie's house, record the podcast episode that you're about to listen to. It's long overdue. I really don't know why Paula and I haven't recorded a podcast before, because I've known her for several years now. She's been in Mom Goes On and Mom Goes On Masters since like mid 2020. But I'm really excited to bring you her story. What I love about Paula, so many things, but what I think you'll love about Paula too, is she's just super authentic and honest. She never tries to pretend to be anybody other than who she is. She's always so willing to get coached and be vulnerable. And I just think you'll resonate to so much of what she says. So I'll stop talking and let you listen to this episode, Widows Unfiltered, an interview with Paula Fleming. Enjoy.
All right, Paula, welcome to the podcast. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
It feels like forever. I'm not quite sure why we didn't do this a long time ago, because I've known you for so long and you've been in Mom Goes On for so long. But I'm glad we're finally doing it. So I will let you just start. Just tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you live, like give us the basics. Who is Paula?
Okay. I am 47 years old. I have two kids. They're 13 and 15. I grew up here in Denver, where I currently live. And I went to school up in Boulder. My husband and I actually grew up together, and actually not in Denver, but in Aurora, a little suburb, not so little, but a big suburb of Denver. And went to school in Boulder. And my husband and I met shortly after. Well, we knew each other from high school, but we re-met up right after college. And we got married about 4 years after dating. We were pretty young. I like to say we kind of grew up together. Because since we actually met in middle school the first time.
Wow.
And then we both pursued our educations, and we traveled a bit together. We lived in some other places. We lived in Connecticut. We actually got to live in Amsterdam for a little while. And then we settled back here in Denver to start our lives. And our families were here and our friends. And so it was a great place to have our kids and get, kind of to the next phase of life. So my career was in finance, and my husband's was closely related. He was more on the sales and marketing side, but we both were very career driven. And so that kind of was like where we were, before he passed. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I didn't realize we were the same age until just now. I don't know why. Yeah. And
Even
it's
though
funny.
you thought you were a year older.
Right. Even though I have no idea typically how old I am, apparently that's not something I can remember. Yeah.
That's okay. And
oddly, if you're watching on YouTube, like for the listeners who are watching, they will notice I'm not in my normal office, which is because I'm in Denver. It's such a bummer that we're not in the same room, but Paul and I actually got to see each other a couple of days ago and have lunch, so that was nice. Okay, so then tell us then about your husband, like how, as much as as much or as little as you want to share, how did you become a widow? Like, how did you get here to this whole widowed experience?
Yeah. So Aaron, my husband, was very fit and healthy. We were both very fit and healthy together. he was a runner. He basically did all the things. We did all the things. And so he had had some knee surgery in January of 2020. And then so he was like kind of laid up. And, looking back now, even over the course of the previous years, I guess, there were signs that he was struggling with some things, like his asthma had come back, which he had suffered from as a kid and kind of grew out of in high school. And then he was, so he was laid up, wasn't doing much. And it was, we were living our best lives, traveling and doing all these things. But then right there at the end, the pandemic hit. And so it was basically, we were holed up in our house like so many others. He used to travel a lot for work. So he was home and he had this knee surgery. And so we were at the house and we were just having like a great time as a family in the house. He was home. We were having family game nights. We were having fancy dinner parties, just us, and all kinds of things. And we were working out, him and I, together in the basement a lot. And one afternoon, he said, "I think I'm going to go work out." And I was like, "Oh, I'll come join you." And he's like, "I think I'd like to work out by myself today." And it was kind of struck me. And I was like, okay. And then I thought about it, and I had been doing this like trampoline workout that I think was sort of annoying to him. And so I was like, oh, I must be annoying him down there. So I was like, well, I'll come join in a little bit then. And so I went upstairs and did a few things, came downstairs. About 20 minutes later, I saw he had one of his like physical therapy video things on the TV. And I was like, oh, you really didn't want me to work out with you, because I saw he was using the TV and all these things. And I was talking to him and I just didn't hear a response. And I looked down and I knew immediately something was wrong. And I mean, after that, things are sort of a blur. But it was this was in April of 2020. So we were definitely in the depths of the pandemic. And, there was a lot of chaos that ensued. And, the paramedics got here. My neighbor gave CPR. And, I know at some point I was upstairs, I was downstairs. It's all sort of a blur, but I just remember coming down the steps and having the paramedics come up from the basement, and my neighbor was there. And he's like, "Oh, he's okay." And then his face fell and they were like, "There's nothing we can do." And I just remember, collapsing, and it was awful. And then, it's just like, we didn't know what happened. We had no idea. Here was this perfectly fit and healthy man, no COVID. It wasn't a COVID related thing. We didn't know at first, but we came to find out. And it took actually a couple of months to find out. But he had an underlying disease called sarcoidosis, which causes granulomas to grow in your internal organs. And he was so healthy that it sort of almost masked maybe symptoms that he might have had. But looking back, like the asthma, some things that had popped up were definitely signs of what was maybe happening. But that eventually the granulomas, if untreated, go to your heart and cause arrhythmia. And so he had a cardiac arrhythmia, and it was it's a very rare disease, and not a lot of it is understood about it. And so, it was quite shocking. And so, it was just sort of we were left with a lot of questions, and just thinking what and obviously I have relived that moment so many times, but it was just, and then surrounded in the context of the pandemic, it was quite surreal. For sure.
What had your experience with bereavement grief been prior to his death?
Very minimal. I mean, I've been very fortunate. I lost my grandmother when she was, almost 90, but not really anything serious like that. I didn't know anything about grief as I came to find out.
Yeah. And as we come to find out, what we thought we knew maybe isn't actually very helpful.
Right. Right. I was shocked by grief. Yeah.
What was that shock like for you?
Well, fortunately, I mean, I did get into therapy, which I had never done before. And so I had a therapist sort of helping me understand things. But I think the things that surprised me the most were um, the fatigue, like the
Mm-hmm.
utter fatigue, um, the just the inability to remember the widow fog, which I didn't even know was a thing,
Mm-hmm.
just completely losing lapses of time, like not even knowing. Like I said, even recounting that day, I can't even tell you like the order of events or what happened. It's like
Mm-hmm.
I know that our minds do this to protect us, but my mind just like couldn't take it all in and even
Yeah.
the months following, it was just complete like like literally your world is turned upside down and you feel like there's nothing grounding you.
Yeah. Sounds like you had a therapist though that was maybe helpful in normalizing some of those things.
Yeah. In fact, I mean, it's funny because I would have like these good days and I would tell her, oh, I'm having a great day. I'm like, I'm on the upswing, like in my mind. She's like, oh, just enjoy this good day because tomorrow
Mm.
might not be so good. And it's not going to be. Like, she basically prepared me for the roller coaster, which was really
Mm-hmm.
helpful because I'm an Enneagram 7, which, if people are familiar, that's the enthusiast. So I always
Mm-hmm.
tended in my life to just reframe things to the positive, like, oh, we're
Mm.
on the upswing now. I think I've heard it described as you only experience like half of the emotions, like the good
Mm-hmm.
emotions. And so in this moment, suddenly, like I couldn't reframe. I couldn't so I was grasping,
Yeah.
and so that was helpful for sure to
Yeah.
have someone tell me like, yeah, you're not like this is not linear.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
we don't have to measure ourselves, based on what we would call a good day. Like it doesn't mean anything if today feels good and tomorrow feels terrible. It doesn't mean we've fallen backwards or we're doing something wrong or we're not on the right path. It doesn't mean
right.
anything. But if we don't know that, we do tend to make it mean something that it doesn't have to mean.
Yeah, I was like, I'm gonna get stuck, I was,
Hmm.
and I went to some of the Facebook groups, which I know I don't mean to generalize all of them, but they were discouraging to me personally. I just was like, oh my goodness, like some of these people are 5 years out, 10 years out. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna get stuck.
Hmm.
And I was so worried that I was gonna fall. I used to call it the downward spiral. I was just gonna fall
Mm.
into the downward spiral.
Yeah.
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 Mm.
And plus, you're dealing with the pandemic. You've got two young children.
Yeah, it was so crazy. I didn't know anyone who had lost a partner, and no one in my social circle had anything like
Hmm.
this happen. I had one friend that had lost a child. She was really helpful to me. But I was but of course, during the pandemic, I couldn't really connect with people.
Hmm.
So it was crazy. I felt like I was in a dream, like a nightmare.
Hmm. Yeah. How long did your widow fog last?
It's funny. It lasted a long time. Even I'm sure we'll get to this, but my kids and I took a long trip.
Yeah.
And I'm on a finance committee for a nonprofit here, and I was doing meetings with them before we did our trip, and then I took a hiatus from doing that, and I came back, and I was on these meetings again, and I was like, it was like that was like a real litmus test for me, like being on those calls again, because
Mm.
I remembered like I would be on those calls and like the numbers weren't registering, and this was a year later. Like,
Yeah.
so I think it took like honestly a year and a half to really, I mean, obviously the really deep widow fog
Hmm.
definitely subsided, but it wasn't gone for quite some time.
Yeah. I think that's so
Yeah.
valuable for people to hear,
Hmm.
right? Like it's different for
Yeah.
everyone, of course, but like it can last for a long time.
Yeah. It lasted longer than I would have expected. And
Hmm.
yeah, it was very telling to me when I was like, I understand these numbers again.
Yeah.
I didn't. I
Hmm.
didn't when we left, and now I do
Yeah.
again.
Yeah. If you, knowing what you know now, if you could go back and give yourself some advice in the early days of his loss, what would you tell yourself?
Um, just breathe. I mean,
Yeah.
just breathe and just be where you're at. And I mean, I think I was grasping, like trying so hard to just, and it's like I couldn't, I just needed to surrender a little bit to it.
Mm-hmm.
I would, in a way, just surrender to it. And it's like once I could surrender a little bit and just like for me, it was like feeling the feel, like the 100 felt feelings, all of
Mm-hmm.
that. Like that's when shockingly, I was so scared of those emotions. I was so scared of going down the downward spiral. But
Mm-hmm.
actually, when I just like surrendered to where I was at, that's when I actually started to feel
Mm-hmm.
even, just a little bit better. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
But the
yeah,
fear of going down the spiral, emotionally speaking, is what
yeah,
kind of held you back from letting yourself have the experience of surrendering to those feelings.
yeah. I was really
Yeah.
scared I wasn't going to come back from it. I was really
Mm-hmm.
scared that my life was over too. There was a
Yeah.
part of me that wanted to be where Aaron was. I mean, we had built this big life together, this wonderful
Mm-hmm.
life together, and I just could not imagine like how I was going to possibly go on without him.
Yeah.
And I had never ever in my life been to that dark of a place
Mm-hmm.
because I always was a reframer. I was always, glass
Mm-hmm.
half full, like, and so it was so hard for me to like just open myself up to like, you're okay feeling this way. This is
Yeah.
okay. It sucks. It's horrible, but it's like just, once I let myself do that and I surrendered to it and I saw I wasn't going to fall off the cliff,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
it was just really helpful for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it makes so much sense why we would worry about falling off a cliff or going down a spiral.
Yeah.
If we haven't actually had the experience of feeling feelings and knowing that they're not gonna take us somewhere we don't want to go, of course, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did you end up in my orbit? Like podcast first? Like how'd you get there? Tell me about that.
Yes. So, and early days, honestly, like I said, I was grasping and I was a big podcast
Mm-hmm.
fan. Aaron and I were big podcast junkies, always like listening to new podcasts. And I remember, of course, I wasn't sleeping and I'm like, there has to be a podcast on this, like
Mm-hmm.
on grief and health. I just need to know, like, so I need information. I don't know. And so I listened to a couple different ones and then I got to yours and those were okay, but like I got to yours and you didn't have a lot of podcasts yet at the time, but it was like your
Mm-hmm.
first few. And I just was like, yes, this is
Mm-hmm.
it. It spoke to me because I think that everything right then was just like, how do I live again? Like, how do I not want to just go where Aaron is? Like, how do I just feel that I'm still alive? And so
Yeah.
I think your podcast in particular was like, okay, here's someone who like is all about this,
Mm-hmm.
creating
Yeah.
the next chapter, living again, like, and so, yeah, so I started listening to your podcast and then I heard about your program and we had a little chat. And so I actually joined in June of 2020, which was early, but
Mm-hmm.
also, in a time when I was isolated. And
Yeah.
so to me, it was like such a, I know I wasn't, and probably in my first few calls and coaching calls, I imagine, I don't know if you remember, but I was probably like a zombie a little bit. It was like, I would go back and re-listen to those calls and I'm like, did that
What
happen?
just
I don't
happened?
remember that.
Yeah.
And but I needed to connect. I needed
Mm-hmm.
to like, I needed to meet those other women. I need, that were on the calls. Like it was just so good for me. And then because I was so isolated and I was in such a dark place, I had on my calendar, it was like, okay, the bi-weekly call or the 2 times a week
Mm-hmm.
calls, and then my one therapy session a week. I mean, those would just get me through. My grief
Oh,
bucket
yeah.
would like fill up and I'm like, oh, it's Tuesday. We have our mom goes on call. I can release a little bit, and my grief
Yeah.
bucket would like fill up and then come down. And it was really helpful for me to have those. It was the 3 things a week that I
Uh-huh. It's such a relatable visual, your grief bucket
had.
filling up. Yeah.
I thought about it a lot when I was like, okay, it's just your grief, fear of going down the downward spiral. I'm like, nope, it's just your grief bucket
Mm-hmm.
filling up. You're going to empty it. It's going to get emptied. You're going to get some release. It's going to happen.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Was it difficult for you to reach out and like apply for the program, or was it an easy thing to do? How was that for you?
It was, I mean, I remember from my, again, widow fog, I think it was
Yeah.
pretty easy. I think I maybe like sent an email, or I'm not sure, however we were doing it back then. But I just, yeah, it was pretty. And then you scheduled that like free consultation call. And
Back
then,
in the day.
yeah.
Back in the day where we made you get on the phone with us. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it was just like, and then you told me about the program, and I was so excited that there were workbooks, because I was like, something tangible. That really spoke to me at the time, because I was like, let me just do a workbook and this is going to get better.
Yes. All
You
I
know?
need to do. Pages in a workbook. Yeah.
Yeah.
How is it the experience compared to what you anticipated it might be like?
I mean, I had never done therapy. I had never really done life coaching. I had seen a career coach at one point, but I guess I didn't know what to expect then. I guess I was just like, whatever comes my way, it's got to be helpful. Like, but then when we got into like the modeling process, and then dealing with like the manuals that you have for yourself and other people. I mean, these are just like tools that I learned through Mom Goes On. Maybe they had to be repeated to me a few times as I went through it, but like I still, it's in my daily toolbox now. Like I just, this is a manual. I'll tell myself, this is a manual you're having for that person. I don't know if that'll totally make sense to your listeners, but like that was really helpful. That's been really helpful.
Yeah, I think what I hear pretty consistently is that people anticipate that they will receive help and support related to grief, but they don't anticipate that the tools they're going to learn will continue impacting them in their daily lives, kind of outside of what they assume grief, the tools will be for. And that usually seems to be surprising.
Well, for sure. And that's why 3.5 years later, I'm still in the program.
Yeah.
Because I still find it applicable to what everything that I'm going. I mean, and grief doesn't end, as we know, it just keeps going. And there are grief related things. But I think as time has gone on, I've gotten away from like acute grief, and it's become more about living.
Yeah. So you kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier, but I'd love to hear, or I'd love my listeners to hear the details. Talk about like the trip that you took your kids on, how you came to that, like what that was about for you. So it's kind of a big deal.
Yeah, I think so, there was a little bit of, because, losing Aaron, being in the middle of pandemic, feeling like the rug had been completely pulled out from underneath me. I would say that the silver lining of all that is you just don't really like you just don't care anymore. You just are kind of like, I could do anything. Like you just suddenly have this realization that like life is short. The rules aren't what you thought the rules were. And there doesn't have to be any boundaries on this. Like clearly there's no boundaries on life, because this thing happened that I thought could never happen.
Yes.
And then it's just like, oh my gosh, there's no boundaries. But what are we going to do? And like I said, there was this part of me that was really aching to feel alive again. Like just wanting to know that me and my kids' life was going to continue, that we weren't going to, just evaporate, And so I think a lot of things came with that. And I started telling kids, we can do anything we want now. We could go live in Hawaii. We could, we could just really do anything. And so I've always loved to travel. Aaron loved to travel. We had the opportunity to live abroad before we had kids. And we'd always said like, oh my gosh, wouldn't it be cool to like have our kids have this international experience, maybe when they're, middle school or high school. So that was in my brain. And then I have a really dear friend who lives in Spain, and her family were like, come here for a year and just spend a year here. And so that was initially sort of the thought. And then, with COVID and visas and all this kind of stuff, it sort of morphed into like, let's travel for a year.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what we did. So I rented out my house here in Denver,
Mm-hmm.
and I planned out like the first 3 to 4 months, sort of, because I was nervous and I wanted to have a plan. But as
Mm-hmm.
the year went on, it became a little bit more like willy-nilly, and kind of deciding where we wanted to go next, and got much more brave as time went on. And I homeschooled my kids. And so once I got into this, I found out that it's something that's called world schooling. It's like actually a community of people
Oh.
out there doing world schooling, and there's Facebook groups. And so I joined these Facebook groups, and I started to learn about these meetups where families would meet up in other countries. And so that dictated a little bit of where we would go. We would join these like world schooling meetups. And
Mm-hmm.
so we started our trip in August of 2021. So pandemic was still, I mean, COVID things were easing, but then they would like come
Mm-hmm.
back and go away and come back. So we had a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of juggling as we traveled. But honestly, it was a great time to travel in that, it was, a lot of, there wasn't many people out there.
Yeah.
And we were being cautious and all those things. But yeah, so we got out there, we road tripped through the UK for about 5 weeks, where I had to learn to drive on the other side of the road and
Oh,
all
no,
that.
thanks. Uh,
And then we ended up spending 3 months in Spain with our friend and her family. And then we went to Egypt. And then in the meantime, we had planned to come back through Denver. My dad passed away. So
mm-hmm.
it was like, he had been sick for a while. It was a very different experience than the sudden loss of Aaron. It was like anticipatory loss of him,
Yeah.
because he had esophageal cancer. And
Mm-hmm.
so we planned on coming back through for Christmas to see him. And sadly, he passed away like right as we started our trip. Um, and so we did come back through, which was great. And just to spend Christmas with the family, sort of repack our bags, and we headed to South America. So the rest of the trip, the rest of the year, it basically turned out to be a little over 11 months, but we went through, we were in Ecuador and Peru and Chile and Nicaragua and yeah, and Panama. So we kind of like made our way all the way south to Patagonia, and then made our way all
Mm-hmm.
the way back up through Central America. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it was awesome.
Amazing.
It was awesome. It obviously had its challenges. I don't want to,
Sure.
totally say it was
Yeah.
perfect, but yeah.
I just think it's so interesting how your brain went to all the options are available to us. And then also sometimes you see people's brains go to the complete opposite, which is now I can't have anything I want, right? Like nothing is
Mm-hmm.
available to me. And so it's just fascinating how different people respond in different ways and how you went to, okay, no, like all the rules are apparently not applying anymore. What do we want to do now? And then open doors for yourself with that.
Yeah, I think I was fearful of going the other direction. I did not want to go the other direction,
Mm-hmm.
because that to me, I mean, there were days I wanted to go the other direction. Like I felt like I was going there, like my life is over. And then
Mm-hmm.
I just thought, like, I mean, there's so many reasons that didn't want to go there, but one of them was it, like it would not have been what Aaron wanted for us. Like
Mm-hmm.
he would have wanted us to do exactly what we did. He was just, he had a zest for life. And I used to be like a really kind of like nervous mom. Like I never wanted my kids to get too close to the edge. And he
Mm-hmm.
was like super brave. And we went on a Via Ferrata just a few months, but August. So quite a few, within a year before he passed. But, and the whole time he's like, I don't know if anyone knows what a Via Ferrata is, but it's like a
I don't know what it is.
climbing thing. It's like
Okay.
basically climbing, like it's like means Iron Road in Italian. And it's like, but there's, ladders and you're hooked in, but you're basically climbing mountains. And I had a terrible fear of heights. And
Oh,
he
wow.
never had a fear of heights or anything. But I did it with him because I knew he really wanted to do it. And I just gritted my teeth and I got through it. And he joked there were no pictures of him because I couldn't let go to like take a picture, and all the
Oh,
pictures are of me. And so, um, but it was weird. Like, after he passed, like, I feel like he gave me his braveness in a way. Like, it kind of came to me. I know that sounds kind of woo woo, but like, I kind of like lost my fear of a lot of things suddenly. And like, I started climbing. I mean, I started doing these things that I wouldn't have probably done before. And I think so. I just felt like it was him sort of pushing us, giving me that gift, what he might have wanted for us. Like, I know he would be so proud. He was always so proud of me and the kids. But it was like he was like he would brag about us and it would embarrass me. But he was so proud, and I know that like continuing on and doing that would have made him really proud as well. So if I had gone the other direction, it would have been a total discredit to who he was and what he would have wanted for us. Yeah.
And what an opportunity to help your children see you being resilient, right? And I can only imagine when you're traveling, through foreign countries during the end of a pandemic, there's got to be a lot of other opportunities to practice being resilient and, have things not go your way and then decide who you want to be when that happens. And so you just, I don't imagine how we could possibly recreate that in the school system, right? Going to class day to day as you could in that experience.
It was definitely, and it brought us, the three of us, like so close together. And I think we were able to have moments where we could really remember Aaron and think, oh, Daddy would have thought this, or he would have thought that. Or we used to joke that he wouldn't have necessarily loved, because we didn't travel in luxury. And because he traveled for work, he always was like 5-star hotels and he had all these travel points. And so we joked that like, oh, Daddy would not like this place that we're staying.
That's funny.
So but yeah, I mean, it was definitely, it was good. And I think for me, like, I was also a big thing for some reason when we left and we got out on the road, I felt like a huge weight had been lifted off of me. And I think a lot of it was, because it was the pandemic and just the circumstances around it. I mean, really well-intentioned friends and family, but I couldn't say no to anything. And I was like, my calendar was just, people were, trying to be involved, and I appreciated all of it, but it got to be a little much. I was like a little bit, I hate to use the word, but a little bit smothered, by just my day to day. I was like, oh my gosh, and all the decision making and the things, and feeling pressure to do things financially and all this other stuff. And then it was good to just step away and just like to go and do this, because at the end of the day, there was no rush for any of the things, and there was to maybe move on to what I was going to do next in the career, or what, this or that. It was nice to just step away for the 11 months and just breathe and just not have to think about, well, where are we going to live? What's my career going to look like? How are they, all that stuff. It was good to get away.
Yeah. I remember it was fun when I would see you had signed up for coaching, to always see you in a different place or on a different time zone. It was kind of fun. Yeah. What was it like coming back off of that trip back into your real world? Because I remember some conversations about that being kind of hard.
It was so hard. It continues to be hard, honestly. I mean, I think I have a little wanderlust, like, naturally, and but I did feel like it was, the kids. My daughter was starting high school, and it was their time to settle in and regroup with their friends and all the things that come with being their ages. And so I was, it was a little bit of like, okay, what now, Paula? And it still is. I'm still sort of sorting through that a little bit, and that's what I mean. That's why I'm still a mom goes on, because I still am working through a lot of these things. And but it's been good. I mean, it really was wonderful to come back to our community. Like, we have such a great community here, friends and family. And we've met great people out on the road. Like, we met amazing people traveling, but like, it was a great experience to come back and like just pick up where we left off with a lot of people. And then, getting the kids into their routines. And so, yeah, it's been a little tough. I'm not going to lie, but there's been good and bad about coming back.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think sometimes when people think about, I'll be curious to hear what you thought compared to what I'm about to say. But sometimes I think when people hear me talk about loving life again, they think it's
Mm-hmm.
going to all be like, what's in the way of loving life again all has something to do with the loss, right? And the relationship and the person. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes things like what you mentioned, like people pleasing, right? Like
Mm.
figuring out what is it that I want? How do I say no to people and prevent my calendar from being completely booked? Like, what is my identity? Who do I want to be?
Mm-hmm.
How do I want to be in the world? Yes, it's in our face because of the loss, but it's maybe not as related to the loss as we thought it would be, which is why I think and many other Mom Goes On members keep staying around because they're still
Mm-hmm.
working through some of those things that maybe they just didn't anticipate.
Oh, yeah,
Does
that's
that,
so
yeah,
true.
okay.
I mean, I would say I had not done like the work before. I
Mm-hmm.
think my life was, I was kind of floating in like a cocoon, and it was just
Mm-hmm.
like things just I mean, I was very fortunate. Like things had just fallen sort of into place. And I hadn't done the work, and then after Aaron, it was like, oh my gosh, like I, you know, I got to like everything fell apart. I fell apart, and then I got to like pick up the pieces and sort of put them back. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
still kind of putting them back where I
Yeah.
sort of, and not that that's like an end all be all. I don't think I'll ever like be this one certain person,
Mm-hmm.
but like it's just been like a whole process in the last 3.5 years of like thinking about how do I want to show up, living with some intention, like
Mm-hmm.
doing the work, thinking about it, feeling the feelings. Like it's day to day. I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
ongoing. I know I really believe like it, I don't think I'll get to the end,
Because
like,
because there isn't one. Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I'll reach Nirvana one day. but but it's a process. And the more I discover about myself, the more I see some other things that I'd like to be curious about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think
Yeah.
it's so good to normalize that too for other people, right? Because I
Hmm.
do think it's so cruel to measure yourself against a standard that doesn't even, is not even reality, right? It's not even the human experience. And so to hear that it is a constant thing. We're always growing and
It
changing.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was
Yeah.
What was your experience with self-doubt like? Like when you go back and you look at your self-confidence when you were married to
Mm.
Aaron, and then the impact that grief had on that and figuring it out, like what was that like for you? Because I think that's also important to talk
Oh
about.
man. Yes, I think, and this is getting very real here. My confidence was shattered. Like, I don't even know where my confidence, actually thinking back, where did my confidence even stand before he died? Like, just because it just evaporated. Like, I
Yeah.
remember after he died, I think because of like the way I was, raised or grown up, and like the culture we live in, like so much of my worth and validation was in having a partner. And like,
Mm-hmm.
and my entire identity. And then on top of that, my entire identity had been created through this 21-year partnership.
Yeah.
And so after he died, I was like, oh my God, like I'm just gonna hook up with I'm gonna find the next old man that wants to marry me. Like I mean, these
Yeah.
like thoughts were going through my head. I'm like, what do I have to possibly offer? Like who am I? Like what I can't be alone. Like I can't be
Mm-hmm.
by myself. I felt groundless and no self-esteem. I mean, at all. No, I complete like doubt of how I was going to possibly
Mm-hmm.
continue as a solo person. And which is so weird because I've always been this independent, like,
Mm-hmm.
I had a successful career. Like none of it really makes sense, but that is exactly how I felt,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah. That's why I think it's so important to talk about it because it is so surprising to so many widows. We don't expect
Yeah.
a confidence hit. And then, as you just said,
Oof.
it felt like it evaporated.
Yeah. It was just absolutely gone. And
Yeah.
yeah, and it's taken a while and it took a while to get back. I still am working on,
Mm-hmm.
who am I as an independent woman? Like that's part of this whole
Mm-hmm.
process.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
How have you noticed, like when you notice the way that you thought about your life after Aaron died compared to how you think about your life, or maybe thought about yourself and how you think about yourself? What kind of shifts have you noticed from then to now?
I think I'm more thoughtful about it.
Hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
I think, I mean, I loved my life with Aaron.
Hmm.
And honestly, there's a part of me always, I just, in a heartbeat, I would go back,
Yep.
if I could. I know I can't because it was supposed to happen, as I remind myself. I mean, I would
Hmm.
go back. I wish I could go back and also go back with all the things I've learned since then,
Oh yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, that would be amazing. That would be perfect. A
Hmm.
utopia,
Hmm.
and I wish that, there's just, it was a great life, but I feel, sometimes I feel now, I go back and forth. I have days where I'm just like, I just wish it had never happened. And then
Hmm.
I have days where I'm like, wow, you're such a badass, Paula. You've done
Yeah.
this and done that. And it's just, it's all the whole spectrum, And so I
Hmm.
think I'm a little more thoughtful about where I'm at.
Hmm.
Whereas before, like I said, I was sort of floating in a cocoon, like a happy cocoon, a very
Hmm.
content cocoon, but it's just, it's a lot more complex now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also think it's good for people to hear that you don't actually have to be happy that you had a loss to be
Yeah.
okay with where you are, right? You
Right.
can still wish it hadn't happened and believe you would go back in a heartbeat and still be okay. Like it doesn't have to be one or the other.
Right. Right. And I go back a lot to, like, the why me that happens kind of early on. And I think getting to the why not me, like,
Mm.
that was
Hmm.
huge too. And just like, especially in my social circles, like everyone else is still in their pair, their partnership, they haven't experienced this. And it's like, oh, why do they get that? And I don't. And then I'm like, what, but why not me? Like,
Hmm.
I think that's been helpful too.
That's so powerful. I got goosebumps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just like these, and then to think about what's come out of it.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything we didn't talk about that you wish other people knew, advice that you would give them, parts of your story you wanted to share? Like, what did we miss?
Um, I guess just, um, that I think that we can be grateful for the times that are hard.
Hmm.
I mean, not
Hmm.
grateful, but like there's just something to be gained from the times when your whole life falls apart. There
Hmm.
is like a silver lining, because it's not, like you said, doesn't mean that you wanted it to happen or you wished it would have happened.
Hmm.
It's just that, like, it did happen, because
Yeah.
again, like, I was such a type A control freak, and I think the biggest thing after Aaron died was I was like, oh, we control nothing, almost nothing, you
Yeah.
know? And it's like, there's some insight that can be gleaned in those times, that
Hmm.
that I was, even now I still struggle. Sometimes I want to get that back, that open thinking, because I've gone a little bit back into, wanting to control things a little bit. I think it's human to want to, like, have
Hmm.
things go a certain way. But I think in those moments when you're totally, like, opened and just completely raw, there's just like,
Hmm.
there's so much insight into life. And then, especially, like, one of the big things that came out for me was just having compassion for other people and
Mm.
where they might be at. Because, like I said, I had
Yeah.
never been in that mental place before. I'd never felt that darkness. And I think
Yeah.
I was like, Paula, you don't know what it is to wake up in someone else's head every day. And, like,
Yeah.
people are probably waking up like this all the time, and you're just experiencing it for the first time. And that was
Hmm.
like super eye opening for me. I
Hmm.
think that compassion has, and also compassion for myself that I think I didn't have before, or
Mm.
didn't think much about. So those have been huge things for me, especially now as I move on,
Hmm.
3.5 years post losing Aaron.
Yeah. What was the shift like in compassion for yourself?
I mean, what I learned was, which it's crazy because now it's like something I've just repeated to myself so many times, that I can't believe it was surprising to me, but like that once I have compassion for myself, it's like this gift to the world. Like it just opened up my compassion for everybody else. Once I started to like not be so hard on myself and to try to understand and be curious about why I was the way I was, or why I might have acted in a certain way in a moment, like it just like started to get me thinking, well, maybe this person is like, it's been this like chain reaction for me.
Yeah.
And I think it's improved a lot of my relationships as a result. And just my general relationship with the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds like you probably feel a lot more connected, maybe. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but
yes, very much so. Way more connected. Just, I think Brene Brown says like, just that, like, everyone's doing the best that they can.
Yeah.
You know, like it's just been more of that shift. Because I know I'm just doing the best that I can, you know,
Yeah.
and people have thoughts and feelings about it. And that was something I've worked through a lot. And Mom Goes On. I'm like, those are their thoughts and feelings. Like, and that's okay. Like, so yeah.
Yeah, we can't control them.
Yeah. And it's like being curious about me, even being curious, well, why maybe they have those thoughts and feelings because, you know, this happened or that happened, and try not to get my own anger, you know, might have my own thoughts and feelings about their thoughts and feelings, you know?
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
Is there anything else we missed? Parting words of wisdom?
I don't think so. I so appreciate you, Krista, and the impact you've had on my life. It's been amazing. It really has. I used to tell my friends, I'm like, I call you KSG. They're like, how's KSG?
I love that.
Early days, like they were like, yes, when's your KSG call this week? So thank you so much.
I'm so glad our paths crossed, and it's been rewarding on numerous levels. But now what I love about continuing to have you in Mom Goes On is that I think you're such a source of inspiration for all of the other women who were where you once were. And I just really appreciate that you're so open and willing to share. Like whenever you get coached, you don't hold back. You're always just so present, so vulnerable, so willing to like let yourself be seen and supported. And that just sets such an example.
Thank you. I appreciate that because I didn't start that way. So I was a little guarded
and I think that's totally to be expected, right? I mean, it's such a fear that humans have to be judged and to not be accepted as who we are. And so at the most vulnerable time when we're feeling the least confident and when, you know, and our brain is working less efficiently and effectively than ever, and to come into a community where you know no one and be honest about what's really hurting, that's really freaking hard. And so like no reason to feel bad, but also something to totally celebrate that it's no longer in your way.
Right. So. Right. And helpful that these people get coached and you're like, oh my gosh, she just said what I've been thinking.
Yes.
That happens. Like it still happens like all the time.
Yeah. I don't think people appreciate that until they're in a group coaching container and you realize, oh, actually so much of the benefit isn't when I get coached. It's when I see myself in someone else. Yeah.
Totally.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for being willing to come and share your story, Paula. I just love you. Yeah.
I love you too. Thank you.
If people want to get in touch with you, I'll tell you what, if you're dying to connect with Paula, email me and then we'll figure it out. Okay.
Right. Thank you
so much. Okay. Take care.
Thank you too.
If you like what you've been hearing on this podcast and want to create a future you can truly get excited about even after the loss of your spouse, I invite you to join my Mom Goes On coaching program. It's small group coaching just for widowed moms like you, where I'll help you figure out what's holding you back and give you the tools and support you need so you can move forward with confidence. Please don't settle for a new normal that's less than what you deserve. Go to coachingwithkrista.com and click Work With Me for details and next steps. I can't wait to meet you.